Sometimes we start a project and our vision gets a little muddied from what we imagined to what we start to expect, and somewhere along the line this build started to go awry. And it was somewhere around where the LED panels started to break. And I told myself I was going to take a break from it, work on a couple other things, and come back. And I spent a lot of time looking for the guy who was going to build this perfect project in one try.
Here, take this. You find him, you put that on. You hide.
So I needed to do a few things to be happy with where this was going. I needed to work out this new light system that I came up with. I needed to finish up the top surface. The acrylic panel came out beautifully, and I needed to make this a lot smoother. I lost the compact factor when I decided to add in that push button light, so this one will mostly be for display or if I decide to build a chess piece to put it into. Overall, the surface is a little rough. There's some pitting in a few areas that needed to be filled in before we started. So let's grab the 3D pen. The PLA from the pen does not necessarily stick very well to the surface of this after I've applied the filler primer. To kind of combat that, I'm going to get some on, and I'm going to take my little metal spatula tool and press it down as it adheres. It's not going to be perfect, and you're going to see some of it come up, but I really just want to fill in some of those dimples, and I didn't want to mix up Bondo to do it. Let me actually just go over what I did here a little bit. I used my 3D pen to fill in some of those areas. It's a really useful tool. I didn't really enjoy it when I first got it, but now that I've found an application for it, I keep all of the leftover rolls of my spools for scrap. And for this project, which we're going to ignore because I haven't talked about, you can see that I kind of used it here to bridge a gap in a very, very bad print. The faceplate came out horrible, the helmet came out really low quality, it's going to need a lot of sanding. But I didn't want to scrap it, so I just kind of used it, and I'm going to use it along this edge to fill in some more of this gap on both sides. And I'll cover that in that build when we get there. So now I've made some progress. I've filled in that surface on this side. I've also filled up the back here and made it more planar, and that's just going to help the next few parts sit right. And again, just with my 3D pen. Now I've cut up some pieces of engineering grade gasket from an extra project I had at work. And that's just going to sit right here in this ring. And what that's going to do is it's going to help, one, protect this acrylic, but also it's going to help give me a little bit more squish when I go to do this push button mechanism that I'm trying to accomplish. Yeah, just ignore the magnetic back. That's not coming out the way I want it to. So now we're going to grab our assembly here. We're going to place our other gasket slice that I made. And this just goes right on top of that assembly. And, if I did this right, then when I press the center acrylic, the light comes on. Boom. Perfect. I like the way that looks. We will fill in the rest of these sides later. Let's take a second to really look at this 3D pen. I have a very simple model. It plugs in USB to power adapter, and it heats up to about 210 degrees, a normal PLA melting temperature. It has a few different settings. I never go past the slowest extrusion speed because any more and I'm dealing with a mess here. and it's pretty great. It's turned out to be very useful, and I'm going to use it to bridge these gaps along the sides, and then I'll sand that down with the Dremel and the other tools. Super easy. And now we're just gonna take this back to my little paint area. Oh man, pull this out, and I'm just gonna give this a real quick filler primer over the new areas that I just sanded down, just to see what my surface looks like, what additional surface work I'm gonna need, because it's gonna need a lot. So now just a little wet sanding time to smooth this down a little bit. After this, we'll go right back to the spray area for a little silver. I didn't get very good video of spraying that real quick silver, as my wife was ushering me out of the house to spend a social distance, hang out with a mutual family that we spend time with in our circle during the quarantine. So she never told me I couldn't take my projects. Using the 3D pen, I figured out exactly how much space I needed without that clear gasket, and then we pulled out the Dremel, and I just used this to clean that edge up. So if you can look, you can see a few other things I'm working on. Infinity Stones, Mold, Gauntlet, Hulkbuster for March. Stay tuned for that. But I printed this in this natural PLA, and it'd be remiss for me to show this off before it's fully finished. But back to the desk. So this is what we had to do. There were a few further gaps along this surface that I wanted to just touch up with a different color while I was working. You see I ran some white in here. I just wanted to see the difference when I filled in these little gaps, and I pressed them down into the plastic with my spatula. But first we gotta wait for this thing to heat up. And we're just gonna go along the edges, fill in the spots, and then we're gonna sand them flush, and then give this entire thing a uniform coat of silver after masking it off where the acrylic is. Since starting this build, I've had an upgrade from my previous area as we've been working on the new bathroom downstairs, and I finally have another form of ventilation to the outside. And that just runs and connects in the back there and goes out the same exhaust that the dryer does. But for now, it makes a really good place to paint. Finally, magic time. I peeled back the tape that was protecting this little section, and I now have my fully silver proto-arc reactor. So a lot went wrong with this mid-build, but I wanted to keep going because I knew that I could always find a use for this. I made me a little lunch, I set up my little paints, and I'm just going to go ahead and add my finishing touches to this, draw a close to this project. It's been a very fun introductory project to getting started here on YouTube. I think I drifted a little bit in the middle of the vision I had for it, but it'll still work, and it'll sit on my shelf, or eventually if I print a chest plate or some other form of display, it'll sit inside of that. And I've done it once, and now I'll refine the components that I have inside. It has a decent sized battery inside, no wireless charging though. I could replace that push button mechanism with maybe a capacitive touch switch, which might be even better. If I build the gauntlet the right way, I can use the same magnetic reed switch that I'm going to put in that inside of this to actually function as like a touch on and off. So I have a lot of ideas, and I more than likely will tackle this one again. So who knows? If you stay tuned, I might give this one away. We'll see. So here it is. This is our little project. It is not perfect, but I am glad that we powered through and continued on. There's so many things that I would do differently now that I've looked at it at the end and I've seen it on my shelf for a couple days. So go ahead and drop a comment down below with something that you would like to see built on the channel. I have a lot of content that I've been shooting. You might have seen bits and pieces in this video as well as the first video. And always like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more. The projects are only going to get bigger and more ambitious from here.